Boom! Welcome into SportsBIT Betting Insight today. Pauly and Teddy Weekend Preview Edition. Big game breakdown. Second round. Some great matchups to go over. Gonzaga, Northwestern, Middle Tennessee, and Butler. Two other games to kick around as well. And of course, the play of the day. We recap the madness early, Teddy. We know about this, that the lines are tight, and it was a strange day all across the board. It was uneventful as far as upsets. Only two higher seeded teams won, and you can't count Middle because they were favored.
Well, exactly. In terms of the outright upsets, there weren't a whole lot of. In terms of the underdogs who were cashing, well, there were a ton of those. I mean, and not just Mount St. Mary's and South Dakota State, the big ones. You had, Princeton and Bucknell and Wilmington and Gulf Coast and all of those results, Pauly. All of those games, those were the popular underdogs. This was not a great opening day of the NCAA tournament for most sports books here in Las Vegas.
No, the books got buried. Spoke to Jay Cornegate at the Westgate, Tony Miller at the Golden Nugget, and then not to mention the parlay liability. It got ugly with the late games. All four late games went over, and you had Iowa State cover, Wisconsin cover, Arizona cover, and Gulf Coast was a popular dog, and they get the money.
Exactly. I mean, if you would have asked a sportsbook director around, 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 6 o'clock, before those late games went, how's your day going? They'd have been pretty good, okay. But with all the popular sides parlayed to going along with all the overs in the late games, books took it on the chin. And what turned out to be a decent start to the day, it got very, very ugly late, especially with that parlay liability. And there's nothing worse than at the end of the night, you see how many 6-teamers you just paid off and how many 8-teamers you just paid off. And as you mentioned, the sportsbook directors in Vegas were doing a lot of that at the end of the night last night.
I was feeling good early with a couple of my upset picks. Wilmington was up 15, and Princeton's got the ball down 1 with a chance to win.
But neither one got there. And again, in terms of from a seeding standpoint, they're still calling Middle Tennessee an upset out there in the rest of the world. Here in Nevada, we know that Middle Tennessee closed the favorite against Minnesota. We talked about it on the show earlier in the week. And the whole headline of that show is, you can't call it an upset. It wasn't an upset. It was a right side winner for those of you who had the Blue Raiders.
Earlier in the week, we said we love the madness in college hoops. Well, you're going to see some horrible decisions by players and coaches. You saw what happened at the end of the New Orleans game and on Vandy. Oh, man. Matthew Fisher Davis forgot to score, thought they were behind, fouls on purpose. With the lead, Northwestern knocks down the free throws, and they steal one, Teddy.
Yeah, absolutely stole. And, of course, if you had a Vanderbilt ticket in your pocket, and I did, what do you say in that situation? Kid made a bonehead move. It wasn't Chris Webber calling a timeout when they had none. It wasn't for the final, but it was absolutely a brain fart that cost his team a game and probably cost me a bet. What are you going to do? I mean, not easy when you're Davis, watching and hoping those free throws will be missed. Just one of a number of games, Paul, and you said it right at the top of the show. One of a number of games in which the point spread outcome was very much in doubt right through the final possession, and there were a lot of nail-biters yesterday.
Yeah, let's run it down. Purdue missing free throws again, but they hit the last ones to cover the 9. Vermont had a big run early in the first half. Too much size, though, for Purdue. We talked about that on the preview show as Purdue pulls away. And East Tennessee State draining all these threes late. Actually cut it to 10 against Florida, but the Gators knocked the free throws down and got the endgame scramble points.
So what did you think when Purdue started missing those free throws? And again, they're laying 8.5, 9, 9.5, and they're sitting right at 9 and going brick 1 and brick 2 and brick 3 and finally hit the 1 to cover. But I'm sitting there last year, a team that blew a 14-point lead in the final 3 minutes. I'm like, all right, this year they're mature. They went through that experience. It's not going to happen again. I was pulling my hair out. If he would have missed that last one, I would have lost my mind in that game, Pauly. I really would have. And as for East Tennessee State, they made it real interesting. I mean, the Gators pulled away in the second half, and then all of a sudden, back-to-back threes. In the total, we had our first middle of the tournament in the East Tennessee-Florida Gator game. Of course, opened 143.5, closed 148.5. These are legit numbers. It's the market opened 143, not one book. And the market closed 148, not one book. And it landed right on 145. And the books, honestly, they probably won't complain about that one. Usually the middles can be very, very bad for sportsbooks, but they ended up cashing most of the over. I mean, most of the over bets lost. Everything went 145.5 all the way up to 148.5 lost, and there wasn't any under money. There was no buyback on the game. So even though it fell in the middle, it's still not a disastrous result for the house when it came to that total.
And Winthrop was getting blown out for much of the game. They made things interesting late. Butler laying 10.5, 11. They won by 12.
Yeah, and Butler dominated that game, really. They were in control throughout. We're going to talk about Butler a little bit later in the show. They're a really interesting team to consider right now because they are about the least sexy team in the field. And when you look at the final score, you say, oh, wow, that was tight, and it wasn't. It wasn't a tight game, but that late run made things awfully interesting. ATS, yet another game that comes down to the final minute. Who's going to get the money? Tight lines, Pauly, one after the next.
Yeah, how about the one seeds? Gonzaga was laying 23.5, only up 4 at the half, and same story with Nova laying 25. They won by 20. They were horrible in the first 10 minutes of that game.
Sure. I mean, the Zags never led by more than the final margin of 20. At minus 23.5, they never sniffed the point spread cover. And as we said earlier in the week, Gonzaga, an incredible story, an incredible moneymaker, the best point spread team in the country as well as the number 1 team in the country for most of the year. But that was then. This is now. The markets catch up. There is no money to be made with the Zags. The good times have come and gone, folks. Got to find a new team to ride moving forward. And with Nova, it's a team that's just about survive and advance. Another team never led by enough to cover. They win by exactly 20. It's not blow every team out of the gym. It's move on to the next game. I wouldn't mind at all if Nova doesn't cover again in round 2, because one thing I love in the Sweet 16 round is looking for teams that are 2-0 straight up, but 0-2 against the spread. Those teams don't have any bandwagon surrounding them. They missed their first 8 shots. But what was it? DiVincenzo with the big game for the Wildcats.
Virginia never led by more than 8, won by 6. Bad for the books for sure. Wilmington plus 8.5, bet down to 7.5. All that late money cashed. And again, you're up 15 against Virginia. That's like having a 25-point lead. But Virginia hit them with a big run there before half.
Sure, and then the Cavs, of course, what's going to come down to in a lot of these games, free throw shooting on each of their last 2 possessions. Virginia, remember, they won by 6. They're laying 7.5 at the end. What happened the last 2 possessions? 1 of 2 from the free throw line each time. Left those 2 very important points on the board.
All right, you were involved here. Iowa State over, and then they blocked Reno on Twitter.
Yeah, and I don't know what it was. I just thought it was funny. It's freaking funny when the official Iowa account has to block the official Nevada account for trolling them. But it's just one of those things that I found it funny, so therefore I thought maybe someone else would find it funny. But that total, what a brutal beat if you had the under. And I apologize if you had the under, because I had the over in that game, and I got a win that I did not deserve. The final 2, it was under paced the whole game, Paul. It was under right from the opening tip, and then the final 2 minutes is a scoring flurry. Nevada hits a couple of shots, they drain a 3, and they foul one last time, like, please foul, please foul. The 155 was the total, bet up to 156.5, 157, and it lands right there on 157. Some books closed 157.5, 158. So this is another one that kind of landed in the middle, although that was just a handful of books, not the broader market that had the total priced that high by tip-off.
How about a bad bet in the NBA? The Knicks were bet up from 3.5 to 5 against the Nets, and the Knicks, how about this? They snap a 33-game road losing streak to Eastern Conference teams.
Yeah, the Knicks took a ton of money, wise guy money. They're betting the Knicks even in a game with Kristaps Porzingis doesn't play. I don't know how the Knicks get steam on a night where he's sitting on the sidelines in street clothes. But here's the Knicks, okay? Their last 11 times as favorites. The last 11 times as chalk, they're 3-8. That's not against the spread. That's straight up. Okay, can't lay points with the Knicks. And the markets found that out the hard way. Bad bet on New York last night.
All right, round 2. Let's get to the Saturday games up next. Notre Dame, West Virginia, and Florida. Yeah, Notre Dame, West Virginia, and Florida, Virginia. I got it. Coming up on SportsBIT. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
Back on SportsBIT Betting Insight today, Pauly and Teddy. Time for a big game breakdown. As always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. First up, Saturday, Notre Dame, West Virginia. West Virginia 2.5, 145 the total. Battle of athleticism and tenacity against basketball skills and poise. West Virginia as deep as any team. Huggins uses rotation to press all over the floor. Defensive efficiency, number 2. Turnover percentage, number 3. Steal percentage, number 3. Leads to a lot of layups off those turnovers, but when they're not getting easy baskets, it's a big problem. Teddy, you got the numbers. This offense stinks.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the disastrous offense, but it's certainly not a good offense. Their effective field goal percentage, number 113 in the country, and it's pretty comparable from 2-point range, from 3-point range. They're not good. We're not talking about an offense that will consistently put the biscuit in the basket unless they're in transition and getting those easy buckets off of turnovers. Now, the other thing that West Virginia does extremely well, it's the same type of athleticism that makes the press so good. They clean up a bunch of their own misses. Their offensive rebound rate, number 7 in the country. That is absolutely one of the several strengths for this West Virginia Mountaineer team, and it doesn't play into a Notre Dame strength. If the West Virginia is going to win this game and or cover this point spread, I would expect offensive rebounding will be a big piece of that equation.
Yep, and Notre Dame will struggle to keep West Virginia off the boards. They're 244th in the country. Irish, good as any against the press, though, number 1 in the nation in turnover percentage. Remember a couple years ago, people bitched and complained about the game was too physical and they wouldn't call fouls. Now they call everything. And how they officiate this game is key because West Virginia is physical. And if they call the ticky-tack stuff, they're in trouble.
Oh, they sure are, because who's the number 1 team in the country at making free throws? That would be the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. 79.5% for the year for the team. That unusual in this day and age in college basketball. Extremely unusual. And when you look at West Virginia, that the presses have to lead to fouls. The guys are moving around the court very, very quickly. You can't always control your body. So when it comes to free throw attempts versus field goal attempts, as a ratio, West Virginia opponents tend to get a lot of free throw attempts. They tend to score a lot of points with the clock stopped and from the charity stripe. So it's not always about shooting percentage. It's about the ability to get to the line. West Virginia, by the way, number 308 in the nation in that free throw to field goal attempt ratio. They foul a ton on defense.
Yep, and Princeton was right there. Notre Dame survived. It was an ugly win. This group has learned to win ugly in the tournament, though. Mike Bray, quote, "This nucleus of guys just feels like as this thing was getting close, that's what we did last year. We just stole wins to get to the Elite Eight," end quote. That's a terrific game.
Yeah, but hang on, let me just jump in real quick because they did just kind of steal that win. And there's one thing that's unique about betting the NCAA. There's a lot of things unique about betting the NCAA tournament, but something that is very different than betting in the regular season. Every point spread result is magnified. So when a team covers and gets the money, all of a sudden their bandwagon just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, even from game 1 to game 2. Similarly, when a team fails to cover, especially, obviously they don't fail to cover as a dog, they're not in the tournament anymore, but when they fail to cover as favorites, there's no bandwagon there, and there's legitimately oftentimes value to support those teams in their next contest. Unfortunately, this one, neither team covered the number in the first game of the tournament. Hence, there's not a huge bandwagon right now for either squad.
Game number 2, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Florida and Virginia, Gators 2, 127 the total. We could tell you first team to 60 wins. I don't think the team will get to 60 in this one because of the look at the defense. In the defense ranked in the country, Virginia number 2, Florida number 4. But they do it different ways. Florida uses depth to pressure all over the court. Number 27 in steal percentage. Virginia relies on the packed line in half court, doesn't pressure the ball, but rarely allows good shots. And you saw that against Wilmington. A lot of people complained about their shot selection, but that's a testament to Virginia's defense.
Sure, that's what Virginia does. They are going to run you off the three-point line and force you into settling for long twos. You're not going to get easy shots in the paint against Virginia. You're not going to get any shots in the paint against Virginia. But it's so fascinating to me. Again, these two teams, from a defensive style standpoint, no comparison. Virginia's defense doesn't look like Florida's. Not even close. But in the aggregate, we're talking about two defenses that are both ranked in the top 5 in the country in defensive efficiency. So, one team's going to create turnovers and create steals. The other team is just going to force you away from taking anything about good shots. And the other thing that Virginia does, we just talked about rebounding in the Notre Dame West Virginia game. We got to talk about rebounding here because the Cavaliers do not allow offensive rebounds at all. They're number 17 in the country at clearing the defensive glass after opposing teams miss.
Yep, Virginia struggled on both ends of the court early against Wilmington, down 28-14 as we talked about, but they got a huge game off the bench from Shayak, who had 23 points and 2 steals off the bench as well. You know what I think? I think Florida's a very good team that people downgraded because Vandy beat them 3 times, and 2 of the games were late in the season.
Sure, but the Gators also have had their fair share of key injuries that have possibly kept them from being in that elite status. And when the Gators are great, they dominate the SEC. They didn't dominate the SEC this season, but it wasn't just Shayak who did so. As a role player coming off the bench for Virginia, Kavarius Hayes. He took only 3 shots, 7 points against East Tennessee State, 6 steals, 2 blocked shots. He was all over the place on the defensive end of the court, doing what the Gators love when he does.
Up next, we continue. How about Middle Tennessee and Butler and Northwestern and Gonzaga, plus the play of the day on SportsBIT. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Go to SBRodds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
Wrapping it up on SportsBIT, betting insight today. Big game breakdown continues. Live odds, sportsbookreview.com. 30 of 32 years, a double-digit seed has made the Sweet 16. As far as the Saturday games, we only got 2 teams on Thursday that you had the 12 and the 11 win with Middle Tennessee and Xavier. So we'll see if that streak continues. Big opportunity here for Middle Tennessee. Butler is 3.5, 141.5 the total. This is no Cinderella here. They beat a Big Ten team the last 2 years. They're up 17 on Minnesota. They dropped 80 points on them. After the last year, they dropped 90 on Michigan State. Upshaw was terrific, had 19 and 9. And when Minnesota made that big run to cut it to 4, he hit the 3 and they fed him the ball. And they have a ton of athletes on that team. And they believe it. We went through the quotes they had earlier in the week on the show. They're 31-4, Teddy. They know they're good.
Well, exactly. You say they don't feel like any kind of Cinderella. I'm with you 100% because last year they were Cinderella. Really. They were just glad to come out and win a game. And after knocking off Michigan State in the first round, Game 2 against Syracuse, they got clocked. They weren't in it even from the get-go. It was a 25-point loss, 75-50. But there's a different mindset now for this Middle Tennessee State team. They're used to winning pressure-filled games. Kermit Davis talking about the Upshaw make. Quote, he made that shot, and then we just started strong to call the same set things for him. He's made big shots, big plays for us for the last 3 years. This is a veteran Blue Raider squad that's been in this spot before. They came up short last time. I'm confident we'll see a better performance out of Middle Tennessee State on Saturday than what we saw last year in their second-round loss to the Orange.
Quick rant, disgrace by the committee. Disgrace that this team was a 12 seed, and they probably wouldn't have made the tournament unless they won the Conference USA Championship game. Think about that, as they were favored against the 5 seed, and only a 3.5-point dog against Butler and a 4 who swept Villanova. Typical Butler in round 1, no sex appeal. No player scored 20 points, but all 8 in the rotation contributed. They had tough to win through. 39-24 on the boards. And now about freshness, Middle Tennessee will be playing Game 7 of the month of March. Butler only number 4. I think that's big.
Do you really? I don't worry about that at all right now. When it comes to the big dance, we've had 3 or 4 days off compared from when you last played. So everyone's got fresh legs, and you have a day off in between games. Everyone's got fresh legs, and you've got teams with decent rotations. So you're not talking about squads that have to run 5 guys out there and they're all playing 38 or 40 minutes. Middle Tennessee's played 6 games this month and Butler's only played 3. I don't think that's necessarily a huge edge, or any edge at all for Butler, especially with that confidence level that Middle has. But It's a Butler team that, you nailed the point, Pauly. There's no sex appeal. And the teams with no sex appeal, they don't have any star players. Keelan Martin scored 16 points a game, and then 5 players between 7.5 and 11. So there's no big-time score. There's no NBA players. It's a Butler squad that's far more nondescript than the one that went to back-to-back championship games. But the fact that they don't have a go-to guy, the fact that they're just kind of one of these teams that people knows about, but not that many people really know, says A, there's no bandwagon there, and B, they're tough to prepare for on one day because there's nothing to key off of against this defense. So, Butler, Middle Tennessee's a sexy team here. I can guarantee you Middle's going to take all the public money in this game, but there may well be some value on Butler by the time tip-off rolls around.
Last game, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Northwestern against Gonzaga. The Zags 10.5. 135.5 the total. The handicap is simple in this one. Is Northwestern still celebrating? And what do they bring? Because Gonzaga stunk for much of the game against South Dakota State. They didn't play well. Williams-Goss only had 9 points, but they won by 20. Now a big step up in competition for Northwestern. But again, they finally make the tournament. They win a game. Everyone's going crazy. They're the story of the tournament is what they've been able to do with the crazy finish as well. But they beat a team. And, celebration rightfully so. But they just beat a team who had 15 losses and set a record for most losses for an at-large bid. So what is Vandy finishes the season, 19-16?
Yeah, and the other question is, did Northwestern beat Vandy or did Vandy beat themselves? You know what I mean? And the thing about the Vanderbilt matchup for Northwestern, there weren't any real headaches in terms of how do I match up with this guy? How does Chris Collins match up with that guy? Now we're talking about a little bit higher stakes and certainly a little bit tougher competition. Here's head coach Chris Collins after the Vanderbilt win. Quote, you dream of being in these games. That's why you go in the gym with these guys. That's why you put in the time. I tell these guys all the time, when you dream about these games, you don't dream about losing them. You don't dream about playing scared. You don't dream about being timid. You dream about being great, having confidence, and winning. And that's what they did. But we also saw in the Big Ten tournament, once this team has one big win, the next time out wasn't so pretty. I worry about Northwestern in that regard on Saturday.
Yep, back to the Zags. They shot 39% against the Jackrabbits, took way too many threes, 8 of 30, missed a lot of them, 8 of 18 from the free throw line, had more turnovers and assists. Man, and Goss, so as we talked about, only 4 of 13 shooting. His quote was, we were able to grind out a tough game, not a pretty game. Feels good when you win a game when you didn't play your best, end quote. And then you have Few checking in. We had to dig deep to show our toughness, to dig through that thing, and we definitely did that. Our defense carried us this entire game, which has had to do a lot this year, more than people realize, end quote. He's right. Everyone talks about Karnowski and Williams-Goss. That's an underrated defense, and they're going to need it in this one Saturday.
Well, the other thing with Gonzaga is that for many years, the Zags were the big story in 2000 or something, where they came out of nowhere and made an Elite Eight and had a couple of decent runs and made a Sweet 16. And then, for the better part of a decade plus, they were kind of a disappointment year in, year out. They'd make the tournament every year and they wouldn't do anything. And much of the reason for that, the underlying reason, that they weren't a very good defensive team. And I don't think that Few was a very good defensive coach. And as they continue to recruit top flight talent and say, we're a team that's going to be competing at the highest level of college basketball, not just on the West Coast levels of college basketball, well, he's paid a lot more attention to defense, and it's paid off for this particular squad. When you have a game in which you're under 40% from the floor, okay, you miss 22 three-pointers, you miss 10 free throws, shoot under 50% from the line, you have 8 assists, and you win by 20, there's something to be said for that. And the fact that the quotes coming out of that game, were, it feels good when you to grind out a win when you didn't play your best. Few saying, our defense is carrying us. These are positive signs for the Zags moving forward, not negative ones. And I think the fact that they didn't play well on Thursday, well, I don't know that I'd step in front of Gonzaga in this particular matchup.
All right, money time play of the day. Remember earlier in the week, we have this Friday night game. We have Marquette, South Carolina under. So let's keep it going. Winner with USC. What are we doing in this one? Back to Notre Dame, West Virginia. Take it away, Teddy.
Absolutely. Betting number 517. We're going to take the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame plus 2.5. Look, the Mountaineers try to wear teams down by out-toughing them. Nobody out-toughs Bonzi, Colson, and if you, the Irish don't turn it over, and if West Virginia is not creating turnovers, going to have a hard time winning, let alone winning by margin. Give me Notre Dame plus the 2.5. That's our play of the day.
There it is. Another week in the books. Great job with the Google Hangout. We're back. We're back Monday. We know the Sweet 16. We'll recap all the madness from the next couple days as well. Loaded show, loaded month here on sportsBIT. Tell your friends. sportsBIT. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com. Have a good weekend.